afternoon and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland and this week's Full Scottish. My name is Isla Barker. On the programme this week, we are delighted to be joined by Dr. Alan Flowers. Good afternoon, Alan.
Good afternoon from a very snowy Edinburgh on this Easter Sunday.
And we are also delighted to welcome writer and activist William Duguid. Hello, William.
Hello, and welcome from a not very snowy Bridge of Erne, where it's actually the sun is shining. Bad luck, Alan.
To start, we will begin with the Ukraine update. So on day 100... What? Okay, Alan, what is your latest impression of the Ukraine conflict, especially as it has entered its 1500th
I'm very close to the Ukraine situation. I will actually be travelling there to commemorate Chernobyl Day. Chernobyl, something I've been involved with since the day I heard about it on 28th April 1986. The appalling nature of civilian attacks by the Russian regime is I would have hoped otherwise would have been shocking the world, but for the news that we are swamped with from the Middle East. Many viewers may not be aware that a church with the honoured name of St Andrew was alongside a rocket attack that burnt down a monastery building in the centre of historic Lviv. In actual fact, the location is around about 800-900 meters away from where I plan to be accommodated in the centre of this Austro-Hungarian very fine city of Lviv in western Ukraine. So the latest situation is the people are, of course, resilient. They're determined to see this through with the full knowledge that their technology and the very fact that you've got the resistance of a people now around about 40 million will see them win through. And of course, the actions of Ukraine in the Middle East cannot be forgotten. Their technology, their drone technology is recognized now to be world-beating. Their air defense systems, the very fact that over hundreds of rockets, yes, one or two do get through, they do cause horrendous damage, and regrettably, people are still being killed, but it would have been in much more horrendous numbers, but for the superiority and the very fact that Zelensky is able to do a really good deal now with Saudi Arabia. In some ways, the war has turned out to be a plus. I would reckon much more of a plus for Zelensky. So hugely interesting developments in recent days as we came up to this Easter weekend.
And do you think you'll still be able to go to Lviv, or do you think it could be too dangerous?
As long as I've got 2 feet to carry me across that border, I'll be there. I've been going now, honouring the victims of Chernobyl at a very great university called the Lviv State University of Life Safety. They train to degree level their civil defense specialists. And that's been a tradition since Soviet times. This same university I will be visiting and honouring the victim of Chernobyl was a university that trained firemen and fire officers at all levels during Soviet times. It was a college, a fire service college, founded in 1947. An additional point about Lviv is there's a wonderful exhibition to Chernobyl. We have a 40th anniversary coming up. My goodness, you've got to be over the age of 60 to have been an active professional participant, at least. Although the liquidators may be a little bit younger, some of them. It's rather old men's recollections at the moment that's going on with that. So, yes, lots of reasons to go, and including a wonderful poet, lady called Vera Rich, that translated the works of Shevchenko, the great authors, the Robert Burns of Ukraine, was translated from Ukrainian into English by a lady called Vera Rich, and her 90th is celebrated on 24 April this year. Lots of reasons for somebody engaged with Ukraine, to be honouring Ukrainians by a presence. We have a 100-year British partnership with Ukraine. A lot of British people engaged in quiet ways we don't hear about, but I know Scotland is very much there. You arrive in Lviv and you'll find Scots helping out Ukrainians all over the place. I won't be alone.
Great, thank you very much. And moving on to the Middle East update. As Easter is celebrated across the world, the total number of Palestinians killed in Gaza since the start of the October 2025 ceasefire has risen to 720. In the West Bank, Israeli settlers make life intolerable for Palestinian communities, while in Lebanon, Christian celebrations have been curtailed by Israeli bombs. In Iran, the US military rescued the second pilot who went missing when his F-15 fighter jet was shot down by the Iranian air defenses Trump claimed were destroyed. Trump's threats and deadlines come and go, but the Strait of Hormuz remains closed and the global economy continues to suffer. So, William, with all these disruptions to these communities within the West Bank, how do you think this can further escalate as not only the war in Iran continues, but also with the continued attack on Palestinians in Gaza or the West Bank?
Well, the West Bank is the thing that really is focusing me in that area at the moment, because yes, the attacks by Israeli settlers appear to have intensified in recent months, particularly since the return to relative, and I do say relative, calm in Gaza in October 2025. The relative calm has still encompassed the death of I think 716 Palestinians there. But what's of concern now really is the escalation of settler violence, and I don't see any break on it, anything that will hold it back. And of course, the attention of the world is diverted elsewhere, and that's the really serious issue at the moment. So I don't see any respite for the Palestinians in the short term, and I don't see any restraint on what Israel does either here or in the wider Middle East war.
And so do you think the possibility of sanctions from the UK onto Israel is possible, or if it could even be helpful?
Sanctions on Israel by just about everybody might work. I don't see it happening because I don't see, I see there being several groups who would wish there not to be sanctions and for Israel to be allowed pretty well to do what it liked. Public opinion generally, I think, is very much against the violence, but Israel is a powerful voice, and it's very, very difficult to see how proper sanctions that would restrain this could be politically supported. That's one of the imbalances we have in the world right now, and to some extent, how what governments are able to do seems to be far, far different from what the people in their countries wish to happen.
Thank you very much. And with Alan, how do you think the UK can help refugees or any people within the West Bank during this time, if there is any way they could help?
Well, I'm a great believer in the expertise of our diplomatic foreign office when they actually get the clear political direction and the clear motivation. Britain, of course, we don't have the best of history in that area, but the fact is we do have the history, and we do have an awful lot of expertise and a lot of back channel contacts. I'm not convinced we're using this to the extent we possibly could be. So I agree about the sanctions point. It's very difficult to get that. I've had a similar case working on the issue of how you put sanctions on a little small country called Belarus. You know, you've got to plug every little hole in the wall and every possible leak, or else they'll be bypassed. I just think we got to get public opinion, and I'm not convinced the Jewish people is necessarily all that happy about what they're doing as we celebrate this Easter weekend in various different ways. I've visited Jerusalem. I just think in their hearts, the Jewish people also must be having a number of questions. So I think our hope is really strong political pressure from all sides on the Netanyahu regime, and I'm sure he will eventually take heed. But I totally agree. The behaviour of certain settlers, the problem is we get this in every country. How do you moderate the extreme, the right wing extreme? Very, very difficult. Massive public disapproval, and good people coming to the aid and halting halting the matters. Of course, as for humanitarian aid, that will still flow, difficult though it is. We really should hold our hats up to the various agencies. Again, Scots are in there in a big way. I'm thinking about the Presbyterian mission that's right in the centre of Jerusalem that I stayed at. And once again, I think we should pay tribute to the many, many people, unsung heroes that continue in such difficult circumstances to aid people on both sides who are in need of assistance, humanitarian and medical aid. There'll be many Scots out there right now.
Mm-hmm. And so let's go to William. Do you think that there's a future with the UK and Israel, especially in the wake of all these human rights abuses and violations of international law?
I suppose I have to be optimistic, but I'm not sure that I see where that's coming from right now. The one thing, yes, I would certainly agree with Alan that amongst the Jewish people in the UK, I think there's a considerable body of opinion that absolutely hates what the State of Israel is doing. And it's very, very important that we separate what the State of Israel is doing from any other aspect of Judaism or even Zionism for that matter. The State of Israel right now is a rogue state encouraged and in cahoots with the USA, and that's the blunt truth of it. And that makes a lot of people who previously have been supportive perhaps of those countries to a greater or lesser extent very, very uncomfortable. And I think government is only just catching up with public opinion in these areas. And if it ever does catch up with public opinion, then we might see something done that will have an effect. But I think the entire world situation right now, the geopolitical situation with the USA behaving as it is, makes things very, very difficult in terms of finding any sort of coherent solution to anything. So we have a lot of problems, interconnected problems to solve. And until we get those done, it's going to be a very, very tricky road for us.
Yes. And so with the war in Iran with Israel and the US, Trump has threatened to pull the US out of NATO as he has with the World Health Organization. So for Alan or William, what do you think the implications could be of the United States leaving an international organization such as NATO, especially in a time of great international conflict?
This one's all yours, Alan, for now.
Well, I mean, regrettable, yeah. Maybe some people are aware I have had a defence and nuclear and not actually been involved directly in the military background. Look, there's underlying close UK, British security defence links that go back decades. There's a tied up interdependency. So whether the US is in a NATO or out of a NATO, that is not going to break down overnight and still continues day to day. I'm referring, for example, to the fact that it was often commented you could take a British nuclear weapon and the only difference between the American ones is it's got a British flag stamped on the side of it. The big close cooperation since wartime in the 40s when the weapons projects were all in America had a few rocky periods, but that's very strong. Of course, the implication has already been seen, and that is a Europe, the countries other than America who were dragging their feet on defence expenditure, have had to realise that there's a price to pay for everything if you want it. We're going to talk about NHS later. Scotland has decided they'll pay a premium. We'll talk about that one. But maybe we need to realise that if we want to continue without a Europe reverting to even something like the brief Nazi period of an occupation right across Europe, one has to have defensive measures, sadly, in place, because there are those other ones that would change our system in a way that would certainly be averse to the nature and spirit of the Scottish people in our long history, and certainly what one bandies about vaguely as so-called European values. So if we're going to defend these, that's a decision to be made, and then you back it with funding. So okay, what's the implication for the countries of Europe, for Britain by America withdrawing from NATO? We'd really have to accelerate. Russia may do something stupid in the wake of however the Ukraine war ends, like an action on Estonia, or that huge long Finnish border. Remember, Russia has been bordered with the EU, although not NATO countries until recently, for decades. The situation of Finland joining NATO now means that that's plugged the gap. Estonia was already in NATO for many years, around 2004 or thereabouts. So we've got a combined population over around about 700 million. Yes, America's got the technology, huge funding, and the big clout we've seen being used, many may say absolutely inappropriately being used in the Middle East. But life will go on, and I'm sure it'll be needs must. But the political will and political decision about preparation for a NATO without America, that urgently needs addressed and a decision made by the people.
And William, what do you think would happen if the US did decide to leave NATO?
I wouldn't disagree with Alan. I do think it's true that the European countries have, to a certain extent, been taking advantage of the fact that the US was the biggest player within NATO, and indeed one of the biggest providers of its resources. And that needs to be addressed, and it's going to cost money, and we need to work out how we're going to pay that. I don't think it's by any means impossible, and I don't think it means that we need to do radical things with the way our societies run. But nevertheless, we're going to have to face up to it. And I think Europe is up to that task now. Europe is a much more coherent organism than was the case previously. It is actually, I think, a slight complication that Britain is pretty well bound up with the US in ways that are very difficult to disentangle, because the more the US behaves as it does, and specifically the current administration, because I know there's a great amount of opposition to it within the US, but the more that behaviour continues, the harder it's going to be to cooperate with America. And already we're getting the complaints from Trump about Europe's, well, he's called it cowardice, but of course it's not that. It's pragmatism, and in fact it's common sense, because what Europe is refusing to do is to join an aggressive war, as distinct from being part of a defensive alliance. And of course, Trump doesn't see that, and people like Pete Hegseth, particularly standing behind him, being very supportive of all sorts of mayhem, that's not going to go down well there. So this is going to be messy for the UK at some stage very soon. No doubt King Charles will go out and feel the brunt of it to a certain extent in a reasonably short amount of time. So, yeah, it's going to be tricky, but it has to be done, because we cannot go on like this. We don't know what America is going to do tomorrow, even if it's the opposite of what they said today, right now. And there's no way you can be part of an alliance where that's the case.
Of course. And in other news, US Attorney General Pam Bondi was sacked by President Trump this week, reportedly because of her handling of the release of the Epstein Files. It is unclear if it was because she did not release all the files or release too many, but questions were raised following her testimony to the US Congress. So, for example, this is a continuation of a trend of women being fired in the Trump administration, such as Kristi Noem, the head of Homeland Security, and now Pam Bondi. But other officials such as, for example, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the Secretary of War, now no longer Defense, Pete Hegseth, have also arguably made great mistakes and caused significant trouble within the US, and they have not been fired. Do you think this has been intentional, that women have been used as scapegoats during this time? We'll start with Alan.
Oh, I don't think anything with Trump is all that really intentional. Emotional reaction to the minute and moment of his consideration or latest irritations. I find this whole process of these sackings just part of a greater concern that we have an elderly gentleman who seems to be driven more by a mixture of personal ambition, emotion, trigger, all two hands on the trigger and shoot before thinking approach. I've worried for some considerable time, almost since day one of this administration. Where are the people that are advising President Trump? It does seem that nobody is prepared to speak truth to power there, because, of course, what he's done is now created this almost Stalinesque type fear that Stalin created. You'd be sitting around the table with him one day and you'd be dead in the water. In America, it's just your job is dead. In Soviet Russia, you were literally dead in various nasty ways. So just very indicative, and it can't be good for the working environment around them. So I see really broad ramifications for this sort of behavior, less alone the detail that one really does wonder why this Epstein thing. I mean, I think many people, without us saying it, might have their own ideas why Trump is so nervous about the whole Epstein thing. And for a president of the United States with so many wars on, seems to be putting so much consideration into something that he shouldn't have to spend consideration and time on. So lots of broad aspects here.
Mm-hmm. And William, do you think her firing was caused by her releasing too many files or not releasing all of them?
I think it was almost certainly caused by her releasing too many of them and not killing it off as a subject for discussion. Of course, Trump's own activities have largely suppressed it as a subject for discussion, but it's still alive out there and could come back. And what Trump wanted was for her to put it to sleep absolutely and totally. And if she did release a number of files, it was too many in his view. I do think it makes it easier in a way for him to fire those folks such as Kristi Noem and Pam Bondi because they're women. And if I were Tulsi Gabbard, I would not be making any long-term plans just at the moment. But there are other people being fired in other places who are not women, notably the top brass of the US military, who I suspect, and we don't know for sure, have been released from their position, so to speak, because they are unwilling to follow illegal orders or are certainly putting up some opposition to it. And that was what Alan, I think, was referring to when he talked about your job suddenly being wheaked from under you if you speak out against him. It's not so much that the people around Trump are failing to speak truth to power. The people who are beginning to speak truth to power are now external people. The cabal is actually around him, and they are both supporters of him and also the people who will put up the next one in place, whether that's J.D. Vance or somebody else, so that Project 2025 is perpetuated. They're in for the long haul. And Trump is very much looking right now like he could be the short haul because he's starting to fray at the edges quite a bit. And I'll be interested to see at what point it's less advantageous for them to hold on to him in his position as he is now than it is to let him go under Section 20, the 25th Amendment or whatever it is. That's the true test. Their loyalty is to the cause, not to Trump. That's the main point there.
And so Todd Blanche is the current acting Attorney General to replace Pam Bondi. So do you think that his placement in this position will help with the Epstein investigation or worsen it?
I think he will also try to kill it off. He was Trump's personal lawyer previously. He's got and a good friend of Ghislaine Maxwell from the looks of the interview that he purportedly carried out with her. The interesting thing is how long they can keep this up. Obviously, the biggest thing, Trump throws so much nonsense around generally, of which the Middle East war is just one thing, that it's very, very difficult to concentrate on the things that will actually damage him. In that regard, he's probably carrying out the most effective tactic that he can. But how long can it go on? Because there are several voices, and at some point, there's going to be something released that somebody's got, even if it's not an official release, that causes questions to be asked, and that not all of the media who are being steadily brought under control can suppress. So Todd Blanche is there for the moment, doing what he can do, but I think long term there are going to be revelations, and it's just a question of time, and there's nothing anybody ultimately can do to suppress that.
Okay, thank you very much. And moving on to the cost of living crisis. The effects of the US and Israeli war on Iran on the global economy are impacting households across the UK as food and energy prices rise. Would drilling for more oil and gas, which could take years to come on stream, affect prices rising now? And would money be better spent on renewable power and battery storage facilities? Now, Alan Flowers, you are a nuclear physicist and have research in Chernobyl. Do you think nuclear power is the best way forward, or other renewable power that Scotland, or by extension the UK, already has?
I should add, more broadly, I would consider myself as an energy technology specialist. Yes. Every time I see the word renewable, I'm reminded of running a British Council academic partnership project with the wonderful country of Belarus, about more later in Eastern Europe, to show them what Britain was doing in developing renewables 30 years ago. And even more, we should be proud in Scotland. When I was in Edinburgh University in the 70s, the Salters ducks, these floating kind of duck-shaped objects that could bob up and down on waves and produce energy from the waves, was being researched at the back of the James Clerk Maxwell building in Edinburgh. We've been in this game of developing and implementing extremely well out in the to the northwest of Scotland, out in the Atlantic there, a massive offshore wind. We're good at it. I'm not clear to me why the investment. I've not been as close as I used to be to the whole economics and the process. There's been a lot of pressures. I mean, it didn't help oil and gas prices coming down and giving us a bit of an easier ride for a while. But I hope people didn't recognise the so oft insecurity of this. My father was captain on oil tankers, and another Scottish sailor that sailed the seven seas. So I learned all about 56 Suez crisis, 67 we had a oil crisis in the 70s. Do we ever learn that even the fact we got quite a lot of that could be further recovered, albeit taking some time. But I'm a very balanced fan of balanced in energy resources. Some base load nuclear, I would argue, is a good thing, but maximize your renewables, batteries, pump storage. I mean, why have we only got one really good pump storage facility that was built decades ago over in the west? They're just the other side of the hill from Ariker. So much more, and let's balance it though. So yes, money should be spent on renewable power and batteries storage. We actually get there faster as well. But what do you put the windmills?
And William, how do you think, with the election coming on the 7th of May, how do you think the political parties of Scotland will react to this crisis? Do you think certain ones will push towards renewable expansion or drilling for Scotland's oil fields?
Well, I'm sure that the different spokespeople have different views of how that should go. But the fact of the matter is that ultimately, Scotland doesn't have control of energy in a way that is meaningful in implementing any of this and having a strategy for how things should be. That is reserved to Westminster, and that's where the money comes from. And that's why, for example, I think the investment into pump storage has dried up. So, yes, a lot of things will be said about it, and perhaps the voters will take account of it. But the actual power of the politicians in Holyrood to do anything about it after the 7th of May, big question mark. Undoubtedly, though, it's something that people are very concerned about. So it's bound to be one of the big things in the election.
And so the Resilience Room has met to discuss impacts on goods and services. So the Scottish Government's Resilience Room met on the 31st of March to consider the impact of conflict in the Middle East. Do you think this room could be effective, or should Westminster be involved as well, or should it not be involved at all? We'll start with Alan.
Well, there's two issues here. I mean, there is a lot of the civil side, of course, particularly the sort of health emergency services. So one can understand the areas of resilience. I mean, it's all about an understanding of what are devolved powers and what aren't. But in a way that there was a form of consultation during COVID, it's difficult to understand why Scotland, particularly given its role and the very extensive devolved powers that are important in times of emergency, why we don't seem to have any powerful voice on Cobra rather than just an assembly of the Westminster government's ministers. So there certainly is clearly a question, and I think an analysis of how things worked and in many cases didn't work at the time of COVID gives us some answers as to what perhaps should be improved in terms of the greater United Kingdom's resilience and planning for emergencies, and as well as, of course, more locally Scotland and this dependence on too many decisions still being made in Westminster.
And William, do you think Scotland could really benefit from being in Cobra, and especially during the Iran war situation? What do you think Scotland and its expertise could bring if it was included in Cobra or other Westminster decision making?
Well, I think Scotland just needs to be listened to, and having a direct voice in Cobra would be one way, hopefully, of making it listened to. I think Alan is absolutely right. We should have learned lessons from COVID, when all too often Scotland were suddenly blindsided by decisions taken by Westminster about the management of the pandemic. And that made us look disorganised, which we weren't. In fact, we were coping perfectly well with the outbreak, but it just didn't look good for us. And it's the same here. The Resilience Room can talk about what Scotland requires in order to facilitate making life easier for people in the difficulties. But all it will amount to is just a lobbying group to Westminster, unless there is a direct voice there. And of course, we have the expertise to know what works best for us. And it might not always be the same for us as it is for the southeast of England or even the north of England. So, yeah, I think a direct voice is necessary, and we could undoubtedly be a contributor. I would far rather, as you would not be surprised to hear, that we were independent and could be taking those decisions directly for ourselves and funding them more effectively through having our own currency, etc. But that's a much bigger debate, which you don't have time for, I suspect.
So, obviously, John Swinney and the Scottish Government have been trying to aid people with their energy bills that have risen during the conflict. So, for example, Alan, do you think there's anything else that could be done as well, apart from, I believe it's reducing the domestic energy VAT from 5% to 0?
Well, yes, and of course that's a fiscal, and once again we're stuck where we are with Westminster having to decide how the bobbies are spread around in that area. I mean, I'd also remind that of course we do have large energy businesses and companies that really are now of a rather transnational form. Electricity de France has a major role in the management of energy in Scotland. So it's a matter for the Scottish government, obviously, where it's affecting civil population to talk hard to them. I mean, I think there's obviously great dangers when there's not much funding to spread around of building up fiscal problems for the future. But yes, I mean, having just heard from a friend that they saw diesel hitting over £2 a litre, something's got to be done, and I'm not sure what's being done about the rural communities. I've got close friends in Kinloch Bervie, and I'm told over this Easter weekend there's actually a £25 limit on the petrol pump at Kinloch Bervie. At least that would have lasted only up to Saturday because it's closed Easter Sunday, but when it opens again on maybe on Monday. So it's a reality. We actually do have in certain areas in Scotland petrol rationing underway because of the reaction of the population to the risk of even higher prices. So there's got to be some urging of the Scottish case, and particularly the issues of our need for rural vehicular transport. There's no railway line or flights to. You wouldn't want to use flights anyway, and the public transport is very limited in the north of Scotland. So there are very special considerations, and yes, there maybe needs to be a lot more done to get prices down in the interim.
So do you think the former railway lines that connected the north of Scotland should be reinstated, or some other solution?
Well, actually, there's most of what was there years ago. There was a great struggle, and thank goodness we kept them going. We've still got the Kyle line running, and you can still get a train to Thurso and Wick, which is a good thing. There weren't any other lines north of Inverness. It might be the odd little branch line. I should know about this. My wife was shedmaster in Inverness and in Kyle, so I learned about the geography of railways. And in doing my Dune race stuff, I used to wait for the 12 o'clock train coming in with the parcels. So, but in terms of the rural stuff, gosh, I wish we could get that line extended down to Carlisle through the border. So yes, where possible, let's get these old lines opened. For goodness sake, France didn't make a mistake with electrification. And back to Ukraine again, they kept their trams going. They never had the nonsense we had in Edinburgh of tearing the tram lines up. I was a wee laddie and saw the last tram in Edinburgh, and I've now seen the new ones. I mean, some things to be said for the Soviet Union that they kept the trams going. We didn't. So, yep, a lot more electrification, and we can have all these renewables, the wind power, the water power, powering them.
Okay. And moving on to the NHS. The NHS is always a battleground in elections in Scotland, but how well does NHS Scotland perform compared to the rest of the UK? So there is the Palantir issue. So Palantir has been accused of a range of human rights abuses from Amnesty and has been used by the Israeli military and Donald Trump's ICE organization. So if used in the NHS, what would Palantir do exactly? What is its objective? William.
I would imagine its objective is to make as much money as possible. That's probably about it. But also, I suppose, being an increasingly large company with its tentacles everywhere, it will want to control things to an extent. And so if there's anything, any aspect of Palantir that wants to control people, maybe they'll do some of that. But principally, it's to make money. And what that money is spent on, well, we might not like it, but they'll have it. And sorry, that's simple answer, I think.
So then, how would the government justify this, the usage of this technology, if it is clearly the Westminster justify this usage?
The justify. Alan can answer. Go on, you go.
Sorry, yes.
Well, no, I was going to come in on a broader issue. I mean, Westminster government will decide on what goes on in NHS England, and good luck to them. We have to remember that fortunately our health service we've got the devolved powers, and I shall be looking very closely at the health section of all the manifestos in Scotland. As an elderly person with a disabled wife, I have benefited, and we have both benefited from the very different and very positive way in which health services are run in Scotland. So I'm sorry, I'd like to broaden this away from your very specific line. I've personally very specific examples of differences, the waiting lists for certain diagnostic treatments south of the border, one specifically relating to scans. My wife got something 2 weeks after a consultant in Edinburgh here, NHS Scotland. And we have to remember it is NHS Scotland. So I hope the Scottish people will again vote for anything that would keep forms of business and profit making out of our health service. So I'm not really discuss this one very much, because I just hope the English people don't get more problems, for they're already problematic. And let's remember, we've voted and agreed. I'm very happy paying a bit more taxes up here for the services. I get there is the tax differential, and Scotland's decided, very rightly in my view, to use its money on the health and well-being of its people, and long may that continue.
And so there has been an announcement of resident doctor, formerly junior doctor strikes in England over the last few days. So the differences between NHS England and Wales, or NHS Scotland, have been made quite clear here. And so how do you think the Scottish government has prevented this from happening in its hospitals with resident doctors, Alan?
Oh, so you pass that to William. I mean, my wife was trained. Well, I mean, I'm close to this. I'm probably too close to it, because my wife was trained. Very proud of being Royal Infirmary. That's Royal Infirmary Edinburgh. Trained. I know the mood. We're close to the nature and mood of individuals in Scotland. There's very deep running approaches, and I just think there's been a little bit more common sense and maybe less political. I do worry about the potential excessive politicization of these events down in England. And I mean, I've had some friends say, well, look, how many people actually voted for this strike in percentage terms? One way or another, let's hope it does continue, that the sides will just apply some good, deep Scottish common sense, balance it. I mean, I as an academic was salaried and watched inflation erosion, so I got a lot of sympathy for the catch up. I mean, we hear these figures, 28% rises, as though this was a wonderful quantum leap, and it sent doctors, way above the rest of the salary raise. The basic problem was there's been, since around about 2007-8, substantial retail price index, salary purchasing power erosion. That's it. You basically, you're doing the same job, but you're getting less for your salary, and that hit people in the medical profession. These loyal servants who would tend to go on and on. So I had some sympathy, particularly with that group of people, and I do think it's right that we continue in Scotland to find that extra money through a tax premium, and that it will continue to be used widely to pay appropriately to our wonderful, highly skilled servants, the real lifesavers, and maintain the service that we've got without all these problems. So big differences. Got a lot to do with the national character, I think.
Thank you, Alan. And William?
I can't disagree with anything Alan said. I would just point out that the reason that we have the income tax differential being quite what it is that it is the only tool, really, that the Scottish Government can use in terms of taxation. They don't have control over any of the other taxes. So, obviously, they can only go so far in terms of the sort of funding that they would really like to see. And if you really want to see a distinct difference, I think there's already a difference, but if you want to see a distinct difference between the Scottish Health Service and the England and Wales Health Service, wait until after independence. You will actually see, with all the fiscal tools available to them, what a Scottish Government is able to do.
Mm-hmm. And so, William, how do you think West Streeting has handled this resident doctor strike situation, as well as Keir Starmer?
Doesn't seem to have handled it particularly well, because I think there's been a certain amount of belligerence going on, and specifically withdrawal of previously agreed things because a strike is going ahead. Now, you can justify that in all sorts of debating terms, but it's not a way of winning friends and influencing people. And one of the things I think the Scottish Government has been able to do better than the English Government all through, really, my experience of them, is that they're simply able to communicate better with the medical professionals and to negotiate with them in a constructive way that means we get agreement and we don't run into strikes. Yes, we have problems, but we don't run into strikes. It doesn't seem to be that in England, and I think that's because the government seems to feel the need to show its muscle rather than actually be collaborative and get things done. It's not the job of government to throw its weight around. It's the job of government to get things done. And within a very difficult position, I think the Scottish Government has always, because it's had to, it has always done that better.
Thank you. And Alan, how do you think West Streeting or Keir Starmer has handled this situation with resident doctors?
Well, I think William was right. Just said it all. I mean, I'm appalled because I lived. My main residence was in London until just the end of December 2024. So I was living under that system, and I got a lot of friends there. And it's really very difficult to understand how these people have allowed, politics and entrenched dogfighting to get in the way of the health and welfare of millions. There's a simple answer. It's the same as Williams. Not at all well, and you just wonder what the psychology of a man who's got into that position with the professional experience he's had as well. You really should know better. But you get in a job and something happens. I used to lecture on this to students. Watch out for hubris when you get yourself into a position of the power and you get convinced you're right all the time. Very dangerous. We've seen a bit of that in Westminster at the moment.
I see. Now, NASA have sent 4 astronauts into orbit to orbit the moon this week in the Artemis 2 mission. Is this good for all humanity, and was this essential? So, some people have said that it is a distraction from the Iran war, or it is to boost morale. William, do you think it is either of those things, or could this be a genuine step towards further advancement of space travel or exploration?
Right. Well, I think it is good for the human race to develop space travel. I just think we might have other things we should be thinking about in terms of how we organise life here on Earth right at the moment. So to that extent, it's a distraction. I don't think it was designed, by the way, as a distraction from any nonsense that Trump and his cronies may be trying to pull. Certainly NASA didn't see it as such. But in fact, yes, it will be used to shore up American patriotic feelings at a time when you've just had 9 million people out in the streets in a No Kings rally last Saturday. So it's bound in that sense to be a wee bit distracting. I think in the context of the money that's being spent in the war, the money that's being spent by NASA, it's still a lot, but it's not in the same league. I'm not entirely sure that ongoing America is going to be able to afford quite to spend that amount of money on just about everything. But it's interesting if anything comes out of it that's a scientific advance. I do think there's a lot of perhaps behind the scenes some exploitative things going on about how can we mine stuff off this satellite and use it to enhance the wealth of the already rich. But that could be me being very cynical indeed. I don't know.
And Alan, what do you think of this mission? Do you think it could actually be quite beneficial, or this is a distraction?
There's obviously the two aspects to this. I mean, one can fall back on the platitude about human desire for exploration, and I'm sure America's one country that's got to be grateful for people that struck out into the unknown and produced a bridge between Europe and the Americas. And I found myself deciding I'd be proud about the tradition of Scottish exploration. I mean, you go through Blantyre and we're always reminded as school children in Scotland, we learn about Africa through the explorations, the work of the amazing David Livingstone. But I notice on Wikipedia at the moment you can find 107 referenced Scottish explorers. So yes, let the exploration lust carry on. But in terms of technology, there is a lot of new technology in there. We're pushing back boundaries of that to facilitate space exploration. But my goodness, what about the embarrassment of this toilet, the plus and minus of the space toilet? Well, first of all, it was a great tribute to the scientist on board as an engineer and a physicist. It's always great to see them putting an engineer and a physicist up into a spaceship, because the person who happened to be named Christine, Christine managed to get that nicely fixed initially. But how the devil you can have a flow out into outer space without making sure you keep it warm enough to get the fluid to the end of the pipe before it freezes? Oh my goodness, it's like, at least it's not as disastrous as getting O-rings wrong on the space shuttle and killing people as a result of a design disaster there. But new technologies you have to learn by trying them out. Human error will happen, but my goodness, I wouldn't like to be that space toilet designer at that moment. Would be, I hope, holding their heads in their hands and just wondering how they forgot about that. So yeah, test the technology. But the other aspect is, why are we only doing a slingshot? Apollo 8, December 1968, and I'm old enough to remember that, it orbited 10 times around the moon. And there's all this stuff about first sight of the dark side of the moon. Well, I'm trying to work out what the Apollo spacecraft windows were like, that they maybe were so strapped in they didn't genuinely get eyesight. They certainly got cameras on it. So there may be a reason why we're actually getting this. They're searching for big firsts. You can just see them coming in the Trump speech. This great, my goodness, Americanize the first. And we want firsts all the time nowadays. So it may well, technically, for reasons we never quite heard of at the time, we saw these photographs, be a first. But in terms of the nature of the orbits, I've struggled to understand why they're not doing more of an Apollo 8 lookalike, something that was achieved now over 55 years ago. We're talking about 58 years ago nearly that took place. So there's a few questions over it.
Thank you very much. And now we play out with an interview with Belarusian actress in exile, Tania Popova. Alan, can you give us a brief outline of the situation in Belarus?
Oh dear. Well, by the way, you've not quite been briefed, as I reminded and briefed this wonderful lady we're about to see from the country of Belarus. I'd remind viewers that's the country just north of Ukraine that has got borders to the west with Poland and to the north with Lithuania and Latvia, but unfortunately it's also got a border to the east with Russia, and a bit like Ukraine, there is a bit of a split in the ethnicity. As we know, eastern Ukraine, there are quite substantial Russian background and speakers. It's rather similar in Belarus. So currently, Belarus has a somewhat de facto occupation by Russia, and many will remember it was used by Russia to invade. The people are not happy with this. Tania Popova, who we're about to see, a long-standing, very highly respected leading actress in Eastern Europe, who has acted and promoted the Belarusian language. Belarus has a very specific culture, not unlike we in Scotland have our specific culture, and a beautiful language that is much closer to Polish and Ukrainian. Mr. Putin, please waken up. The Belarusian culture is not Russian. And I'm very carefully, you'll have noticed, using the modern term for the country. It's Belarus, and therefore the people are Belarusians. In fact, many Belarusians, particularly those in this country, they absolutely abhor when people fall back into the old Soviet term. Now, I'm commenting on all this at length because you will notice in what's about to come up, Tania slightly struggles with the fact when she was born and she spent the first educational period of her life in the Soviet Union. She was born into a Soviet Union where there was a republic called Belarusia, Soviet Republic. That no longer exists. It is now the independent state of Belarus. Now, I forgive elderly people. Tania, when you see her, she barely looks elderly, so I've got to explain all this. This beautiful actress you're about to see does really genuinely remember Soviet times. So I have to explain this because you'll actually see Tania struggling a little bit. She sometimes, when she's speaking quickly, she falls into saying what you've just said, Belarus. And then she corrects herself sometimes, says, oh no, Belarusian. Now, I'm explaining the reason for that. She's trying to catch up. And by the way, this was a final point. You'll see this flag over my shoulder, over my left shoulder here is a white, red, white. That was first raised for the declaration of an independent Belarus on the 25th of March, 1918. And Tania was recorded in the Broadcasting Scotland studio in Stirling on the 25th of March 2026. So you will hear her referring to this day, a very proud day for her as a very much a Belarusian patriot who sadly, because of her views, because of her opposition to Mr. Lukashenko, she's now decided to be in exile where she can continue using her Belarusian language. And she was over here in Scotland preparing to try to find venues. And if any of the viewers here know a wonderful place where we can get an acting group over, they're currently in Warsaw, Poland, so they can travel easily and fly into Edinburgh Airport over this coming summer. We want to hear the Belarusian language again, as we're going to hear Tania first performed it way back, first of all, when she came to Edinburgh in 1995. So big thanks to Broadcasting Scotland for giving this opportunity to understand, for us all to understand a little bit more about an all too little understood country called Belarus, with its wonderful culture and wonderful separate language, Belarusian. Thank you.
And well, that is it for this week's Full Scottish. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. We can only exist with your support. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, and please donate whatever you can afford. Thank you, and thank you again to our guests, Dr. Alan Flowers and William Duguid. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.
Okay.
And now moving on to the Tania Popova interview.
Tania, thank you for joining us today. How are you finding Scotland?
Scotland is so nice for me, and I'm so glad to return here because at first time I was here 30 years ago when we with our theatre come to Edinburgh Festival and we go to Edinburgh maybe 3 times, 3 years, year by year.
Yes.
And I love so much Scotland and and Edinburgh.
Yeah. So back in Belarus, how did your career start? What was your how did you come about being an actress?
I decided to be an actress when I was young. I studied at school and I like to read poems a lot, and I was best in this. And all people say me, "Oh, you must be an actress. You must be an actress." Okay, and then I have possibility to come theater. Academy of Theatre and study there, and I finished academy when I have 19 years old, and I have an invitation go to special theatre for children.
Wow. Okay.
We have a special theatre for children, and I start my actor job.
Yeah.
As like actress in this theater
What
in
was-
Minsk.
So what was your first job?
Very funny. My first role was horses.
Was it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
second horses.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have fairy tale and about circus.
Yeah.
And I was as like second horses, and we have stage as like round, you know, and this round sometimes movie.
Oh my god.
Da, and it was very nice when I stay with my colleague, and I put her and try to keep her hand because
It's
round
round,
sometimes movies.
My god.
And I like this role because it was funny and interesting. And then later I come this theater and go to other theater, theater Deya. Deya, it was theater by Belarusian language, and translation of name Deya, where I am.
Right. Okay.
Where I am is like person, is like person who's thinking, who worry about the world, who has her opinion.
Yeah.
This name.
And it must have been really difficult back then, especially being an actress in a country that, you know, didn't favour their own language. Like they
Yes.
Yeah, it must have been really difficult.
It was very difficult, and because of this, I was so glad when I found troupe who speak Belarusian language, and you know that today we have special celebration. Yes. This is 25 of March. This day of our, how do you say, незалежность. When you have freedom for Belarus, special day. This today.
Yeah.
And when I start to work with Belarusian language, it was so nice for me because it's my native language and I like it a lot. And when we come to Edinburgh, we play on Belarusian language.
Yeah.
And all people understood us.
Yeah.
So interesting situation. And then after death, when was death of our director, our theater changed name. And name start be Новый театр. on Russian language and destroy all Belarusian plays and say for us, please for God. And after this, I decided to go out from theater. First time.
Yeah.
It was first time.
So the first time. So does that mean you decided to go back into theatre after that?
Yes, after, because I it was my dream to be teacher in school.
Oh, brilliant.
Really,
Yeah.
yes. And I am glad that I have this possibility to teach young people to be actors, to know their culture and to do theater and theater's games. And I work in school 10 years.
Wow.
And yes, and after I feel that I missed about theater a
miss the
lot.
theatre.
And I decided to return because I am an actress and I think not so bad actress. And really I was glad when I returned. Until time when the situation happens in 2020.
So you decided to go back to the theatre. How did you find that re-entering it, especially with like all the politics and stuff of the day?
When I returned, situation was not so difficult. In the theater, we don't talk so much about political situation, and because of this, actors are very specific people because they live in the theater, and all friends are theater actors, and problems. All times we talk about theater life, about our roles, about our performance, and not so often about political situation.
Was there a specific moment when you realised that you'd speak out against it, against obviously? Like the political situation.
Yes, when political situation change, I have decision to be part of New Belarus, and I go to the march of protest.
Oh, yeah.
It's correct word.
Yeah, it's correct. Yeah.
Correct. And I was so admired when I see how much people come to the street. It was as like a river from all sides, and so much happy faces I see, because all people were glad to see each other and understand that we are big. It was happy days for all people. But next time it was very, very difficult and a lot of pain, and when I afraid, how they say, when I afraid, because you live and you don't know in what time anybody tuk in your door and say, okay, come with us, because we look at photo and we see that you were on the street in those time, and KGB people look at Facebook, Instagram, and they look photos, and if they see you with flag, red, white, white, red, white. Okay, come to me and go to prison.
Did you go to prison?
Not,
okay,
but my husband was.
Why did he go to prison?
Because he started to be more political person than me, and we have some march of protest 2010. And he go to the square and stay there, and when policemen come and to beat some people run, some people stay. He stay and he go to prison, and stay there maybe 15 days.
Wow. What was prison like for your husband
Now,
when he went to prison? What was his experience? of prison?
experience. After this, when he returned to the school, because we worked together in the school as like teachers of theater,
Oh, okay.
the director of school
Yeah.
come and to say, please
Yeah.
go out.
Mm.
Because some people come to the school and say that it's not possible to work, and because of this he don't have possibility to work
Yeah.
from 20 and 10
When you spoke out against, obviously,
of president against president.
against
Yes.
president, how did that affect your career? How did that affect you being an actress?
My career stopped, of
Okay,
course,
yeah.
because I go out from theater.
Yeah.
I don't have possibility to do cinema. Nobody invite me as like cinema actress.
Yeah.
Any theater cannot take me to the job.
Yeah.
And I was 58 years old, and it's not possible to
Yeah.
find the job as like actress.
Yes. It must have been quite like devastating for you not being able to be an actress in Belarus.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
not possible to
Yeah.
be an actress in Belarus.
Yeah.
Really, I understood this. Just only, how I say, sit at home
Yeah.
or go to dacha.
Yeah.
But actors who stay in Belarus, who go out from theater with me
Yeah.
and decide to stay in Belarus, they have very difficult situation because KGB takes them and have talking, and it was very difficult to stay in country because really all times you stay at home and waiting that somebody come to take you.
Yeah.
And some people go to Lithuania, some people go to Poland, some people go to other country, and now a lot of Belarusian actors I meet in Warsaw, in Poland. I think maybe all are there.
Yeah, it's like it's all go there. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And because of this, in Poland, I have situation when I meet with my colleagues, actresses, when we met early in Belarus, in Minsk, and we decided to be together as like troupe and to do performances, and we did a performance Gorgon Syndrome, and if it's possible, I can read about this performance. If you want to know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah?
That would be fantastic. Yeah.
because for me, it's so important to talk about it,
Yeah.
and because of this, I want
Yeah.
to
absolutely.
say this.
Take your time.
We have a performance created by Belarusian actresses and one Polish actress.
Yeah.
It is an international project called Gorgon Syndrome. The text was written by the woman who performed it. The performance is connected to the tragic events that happened in Warsaw after the rape and death of Lisa, a young Belarusian woman. After this, many women joined a protest march in support. One of the main parts of this protest was a short cry, "Ah!" In our performance, we use this cry as a thing of connection, support, and women's solidarity. Our story is inspired by the myth of the Gorgon. We speak about violence against women in different situations, in the family, in public spaces, and also from the point of view of woman who becomes a witness to violence. We speak about these difficult themes through body language, movement, physical theater, and monologues. Some parts are based on our personal feeling and life experience. The performance has been highly appreciated by audience and festival juries. It encourages women not to stay silent, to speak openly about violence, and to defend their rights. We have shown this performance at festival in Germany, Italy, and Poland. Now we are preparing to take it to festival in Peru, and Finland. I was named Best Actress at festival in Germany in this year.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you so much. And
Yeah.
I think it's okay.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women take this situation and they silent, and any countries we start to talk about it problem, and a lot of women say yes, we have it, and because of this we try to talk about it, and because for us it's so important that women don't be silent. They must to say about it, and I think it's maybe situations be better. I hope.
Yeah.
And we wanted to come this performance to Edinburgh Festival. I hope God decided to help for us.
Yeah.
And maybe it happens.
Yeah. I know. What is it? Do you think it might be like next year or this year? If it does happen?
We wanted this year.
This year, yeah.
But if not, okay, we try next year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah. And so talking about like your family back home, especially with you speaking against like the president, you must be scared for your family.
Yes, I worry a lot about my family because I have my mother. She's for just a moment 81 years old.
Yeah.
And she's not so health person because she was born in time when was war and a lot of problems and hard job, hard work, and because of this, and she stay with my sister. And sister has 60 years old, not so young person too. And I worry about it a lot, and because I know that situation in my country, in Belarus, not so well now. For now, we have very difficult and very dangerous situation, and for example, I am afraid do some special photo because I know that people, KGB people, can look and go to my sister or go to my mother and take to prison.
Yeah.
It's really possible, really. I know people who return to Minsk and they come, they stay at home, and after 2-3 days, take out and go to prison. A lot for this time. There is like theater of absurd, really. Not possible to imagine that it happens.
Yeah, it's incredibly scary.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for telling us your story.
Thank you
so much.